I'm Chris Lee. He's Blake Lovell. We work at southeastern14.com. We're here to talk SEC hoops and specifically Alabama's road win against Florida last night. Blake, I guess we weren't really shocked by the outcome. Both these teams have been a little uneven at times, probably Florida more so than Alabama. But the Crimson Tide go to Gainesville and get a really nice road win. What were your takeaways from that?
Yeah, it's much easier to win games when you have five guys in double figures. You shoot 84% from the free throw line, and you force 20 turnovers. I mean, that's pretty simple. And I think Alabama at times has had issues in all those areas, right? Like, there have been times where they haven't had as much consistency scoring wise as they probably liked. It's been, whether that's having to put too much on Shackelford or Quinerly or whoever. They got that balance last night, and that was huge for them. And I think that's just such a big thing to be able to do that, and it just makes the game so much easier. And then we talked about the free throws. They just have not been a good free throw shooting team, but they knocked down 16 of 19 against the Gators, and then Florida turns it over 20 times, and also Alabama had 20 offensive rebounds, which is just a pretty good thing too. So. I think that it's just, it's one of those scenarios, I think, where you look at what, they are able to do. And we know how good Alabama can be. And I think man, when they get going, they're still hard to stop, even though it's a different team than we saw from last year. It's just when they play their style, they're very hard to beat. And I think we kind of saw that last night when they can turn it on. They're kind of, we talk about the similarities from a style standpoint with them and Auburn, and it's very hard. Like, you just can't slow them down. And I think we saw that when they get going and they have that kind of balance they had, they're going to be tough to beat. And that's kind of what we saw here. And I don't know that Florida, played terrible, but again, it's hard to win when you turn it over 20 times, but it's just, I think Alabama was just better. And that's kind of what it comes down to sometimes.
Jahvon Quinerly, I just thought was brilliant with the ball, particularly down the stretch for them. Made some unbelievable passes. The stat line, he's 7 of 18, scores 19 points, 5 assists, 4 turnovers, was okay, but I thought that the look test, he was really impressive when it mattered. And JD Davison, we've talked about him, Blake, their talented freshman 5-star point guard. Big thing for them last night, he goes on the road, has 4 assists and 1 turnover. He had one, Tennessee, he turned it over 7 or 8 times. That's something they really needed from both those guys on Wednesday.
Yeah, I mean, we've said it. When you get that guard group going, it can be one of the best in the country, right? And I think we see that. For them to be able to get what they can get out of Shackelford and Quinerly and Ellis and all those guys, like, it's just the guys who can play on the perimeter, who can do, a little bit of everything. And that's kind of what they have. They don't just have guys that are, you're just guard guys who are just going to just stand on the perimeter and that's it, right? Like, they have guys who can go do a little bit of everything, whether they rebounding wise, like they can just, I think that makes it so much easier when you have guys that have, they're multidimensional. They're not just guys who are, going to say they're not just spot up shooters, or they're not just this, or again, there's so many different things that these guys can do, and that's where their size can help them out. And just to have, sort of what they have. And I think, like we said, it's something where Alabama's depth, I think it's going to lead to some nights you're just going to have some guys step up in different spots, and that can help. Because I mean, in a game like this, Noah Gurley only played 5 or 6 minutes, I think. And so it's like one of those things where I just think that they have a situation where when they play a game like this and they can have the type of balance scoring wise and they can force turnovers, it's going to make things so much easier on them. And, I think from a defensive standpoint, it's just Alabama's had success in recent years, right, under Nate Oates, when they can turn defense into offense and they can get some extra opportunities. And they got a lot of that in this game.
Gurley fouled out in 6 minutes last night. I'm not sure I've ever seen that.
I know, and that's what I said. Like, it's wild to think that, he plays 6 minutes in this game and yeah, he fouls out, but it's like, again, I mean, he's someone, right? We were just talking about him against Tennessee. Had a huge game against Tennessee. And you could say he was the reason, maybe they beat Tennessee.
Mm-hmm.
But yet in this game, they go on the road, a tough place to play at Florida. and they win by 13 without him even being a factor whatsoever. I think that speaks to the depth. And I mean, he's not going to score 20 every night, but maybe he can on some nights, and that will be enough, for them to push, make that push, and win a game like this. So I think that spells it out right there. Is you go from being the guy that probably was the best player on the floor for them in the win against Tennessee to playing, 6 minutes and 5 fouls against Florida, and you win both games. So that
Yeah.
sort of shows you, I think, that the wide spectrum when it comes to how many good talents they have on this team.
Well, there's two ways you can look at that, right? You can look at and say, man, they needed more out of Noah Gurley, and they needed him to be consistent. The other way you can look at it is they get a quad one road win with a major guy, kind of face planting in that spot. But we talked about this with Tennessee, Blake. The thing is, Alabama's got so many good players. Some nights it's going to be Quinerly and or Shackelford. Some nights it might be JD Davison, down the road. Last night, Juwan Gary gives him, 19 points, puts a plus 13 plus minus. Alabama's got parts. Keon Ellis, another guy who did that 13 points. We talk about him some. I still think Auburn's the best team in this league, but the fact that Alabama has so many guys like that one of their key guys has a bad night, they can shrug it off pretty easily. To me, that says a lot about them, which I know is a lot of what you just said, but I just look at the parts and there's still a lot of them.
Yeah, and I think, it goes back to, I know non-Alabama fans want to point out that they've lost Iona and Davidson and a team that was struggling at the time in Memphis. But by the way, all three of those probably going to be NCAA tournament teams maybe. And think about the teams that Alabama's beaten, right? They've beaten Gonzaga. They've beaten Houston. They've beaten Tennessee now. They've won at Florida. They've got solid wins elsewhere against teams that will have a chance to make the NCAA tournament, like Louisiana Tech maybe, or teams like that. I mean, it's their schedule. They've played. I mean, just look at the gauntlet they've played to this point. Like they're not even, their first sort of let up game is going to come on Saturday when they play at Missouri, and it's still a tough place to win. But we talked about Missouri struggles, but it's like they have played a gauntlet here of quality teams. I mean, really go up and down their schedule thus far. Find me a bad team. Like they've not played a bad team yet. And yet, here they are at 11-3. They've got, like we said, a pair of wins. They could rival anyone's in the country with Gonzaga and Houston. And now, they've beaten a good Tennessee team. They won at Florida. Yeah, I mean, they've still got it. They may not be, you can compare them to last year however you want, but Alabama's still got it, and they're going to be just fine, I think.
Yeah, I don't know that anybody's got more notches in the belt of significance than Alabama at this point in the country. I mean, somebody may. I'm not the expert on that nationally. We'd have to look that up. But quickly for Florida, Colin Castleton's been their best player, and the box score, just a weird line. He fouls. I'm sorry, he didn't foul out. He got 3 fouls and pulls 19.7 boards, but also a minus 18. Charles Bediako across the way has 11 points, plus minus a 3. I don't know. Plus minus is a funny stat, but I think you need a lot better than Colin Castleton's minus 18 last night. I don't know if he's the culprit there. You mentioned the offensive rebounds. Certainly, you would think that he could have done a better job there, but I think when Florida goes, he's going, and they can't have that kind of night from him last night.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because he still scores 19 points, and
Right.
without that, they're not even in the game. And, I think maybe that's the bigger issue is he didn't have his best game, but no one else did either. And maybe that's the bigger problem is that they just didn't get enough elsewhere because, yeah, it's just you look up and down the stat line. We talked about the 20 turnovers. I mean, really, for the guys that played a majority of the game, pretty much – you've got 4 turnovers, 4 turnovers, 4 turnovers, 3 turnovers, 3 turnovers. Like it's just everybody did a little bit of that, and so that didn't help either. But yeah, I mean it is something where we're starting to see kind of that situation for Florida where Castleton is going to have to be at his best every night. I think for them to win these kind of games, especially, and that's where you look around at guys like Appleby and. Some of the other guys that are just going to have to Jones and like they're going to have to bring it in games like this. And not to say they didn't, but like they're going to have to produce probably at a higher level from a scoring standpoint, especially in a game like this. But like you said, too, when you give up 83 points, that's hard to win. So, yeah, I tell you, coming out of this, I don't know that my opinion on Florida has really changed all that much after this game. I think that it's just, I think Alabama's really good, and I think that it's one of those, like we said for Florida, the issue is going to become if you lose this game, now you go to Auburn on Saturday, that's going to be tough. Then you come back home for LSU on Wednesday. So it's like you've got the three best teams arguably in the league in your first three games. And so you don't want to put yourself in an 0-3 spot. So you gotta win one of these next two, I think. Then I think you're all right if you're Florida. But if you start 0-3, you can make up for it in those next three with South Carolina, Mississippi State, and Vanderbilt. But I think I'd feel much better about where Florida's headed if they could just get one of these next two, which again, probably the home game against LSU is going to be a big challenge, but it's probably going to be easier than it's going to be to have to win at Auburn.
I feel like Florida needs one of those guards to step up. I mean, Myron Jones was really good at Penn State. We talked about Flanders Fleming, who I think was at Charleston Southern. Tyree Appleby's been okay, but he's not really taken his game to a new level. I feel like, Brandon McKissick, another transfer that's done some things other places. I feel like these guys right now are just kind of parts for them. And I feel like they need one of those guys to step up if they're going to do a little better than they've done.
Yeah, because, I mean, like we just mentioned, look at the schedule, right? It's like against Auburn, you got to have that kind of play to win a game like that. Against LSU, the same thing. Think about how good they are defensively. You've got to have your guards ready for a game like that. And the same with Auburn. They're going to force turnovers. So I think that guard group, especially the perimeter, that group's going to have to be more consistent if they're going to beat these elite teams. And I think that's going to be the key for them moving forward, which, again, along with Colin Castleton, probably needing to put up 20 and 8 or 15 every night. So
all right, he's Blake Lovell. I'm Chris Lee. We are both at Southeastern 14. Thanks for watching. We'll be back with plenty of more of SEC basketball videos in the coming days.